Hi, Stefan.
Hi.
Welcome to our program, Daha Yaxshi. I would like to introduce you to our audience. Dr. Stefan Meister is the head of the Center for Order and Governance in Eastern Europe, Russia, and Central Asia at the German Council on Foreign Relations. Stefan, I would like to start with the question. We see, like, I'm observing the developments, the recent developments, dynamics of geopolitics in South Caucasus, and I see that the recent event on April 5th, when Blinken, von der Leyen, and Pashinyan met, created a lot of tensions in Russia, which is understandable, in Azerbaijan, but even in Iran. And you know, this made me think about something. Do you think that this policy, at least the perception? I understand that maybe there is not much security guarantees that the West can give to Armenia, but do you think this current dynamics, this current geopolitical, game that EU is playing in the Caucasus makes Armenia safer? Because I will tell you what my observation is. Whatever Pashinyan is doing and whatever EU is supporting now, it's kind of, in my view, makes Armenia not safer, because it's Armenia had already a problem with Azerbaijan and Turkey, and now it starts having a problem with Russia, and even Iran starts to be, triggered. So I personally actually love and support that Armenia is diversifying its foreign policy. I think this is great. I think that EU should have put more pressure on Azerbaijan and Armenia to sign a peace agreement. But something what's happening now doesn't make Armenia, safer, and doesn't contain Russia, because without taking on board Turkey and Azerbaijan, it's really hard to talk about real, containment of Russia and diversification of, of less security threats for Armenia. Or do you think, how does it seem from Europe? Because this is from what my personal observations are, and I was, I'm so eager to hear your opinion on this.
So I'm not sure what would make Armenia at the moment safer, because I think the trends in the region are playing against Armenia. I think Armenia is the loser in a way from the 2020 Karabakh war, but also from the Russian invasion into Ukraine and the shifting Russian interests in the region. And that's why I would also ask what strategy or what policy would make it safer. But to answer your question, no, I don't think so that it makes Armenia safer, because it's a half-hearted policy by the EU, and I think it's even less by the US. So I think the US is rather supporting EU policy, but the EU policy has definitely its limits, and it's all about security and providing a balance, also supporting maybe this peace process, but on the other hand also deterring Azerbaijani attacks on Armenian territory, which are also possible, in one or the other way. So, and I think that's not happening. That's not taking place, and rather we see this how to say it. I think it's, for me, rather a communication policy. It's a messaging policy with a very limited content from the EU and the US side, or with very limited deliverables also for Armenia, and it's definitely not providing any kind of security guarantees. So it might help in a way Pashinyan domestically, that he really now shifts towards Europe. But I think people in Armenia also understand that this has limits. And we see now also with what happens in the north on the border with Azerbaijan, with the villages, how quickly also he can become under pressure, and nobody will help him. Yeah, so I don't think that this is a proper thought through strategy from neither side. I think as long as, just to add one point, as long as the US is not really engaged, I don't think Iran has really a problem. I think Iran and the EU have very limited common goals, but one common goal is that Azerbaijan and Turkey do not control its northern border. And it also does not really trust Russia. So I see here rather an alignment with between Iran and the EU on this issue. And then I think the main mistake is not engaging more with Turkey from the EU side. I think Turkey is the key country. Opening the border also between Armenia and Turkey would be key, and we should much more engage and also leverage on other issues with Turkey to create also opportunities here in a way. And that's all not happening. So I think there's a lack of a comprehensive strategic approach in a very complex region, which is very quickly changing now the regional security balance. And the main drivers are Azerbaijan and Turkey. And I don't see sufficient engagement from the EU side here with both.
Well, you said what could make Armenia safer. Basically, what we see from like the policy from European Union side is to support Armenia because it is a victim and it is it is suffering again, and this approach, the EU is now kind of tries to invest in Armenia. France tries to deliver arms, but this, kind of the leverage, the EU has much more leverage in Armenia, and let's be honest, Armenia lost the war, and don't you think that EU could use its leverage for these last 3-4 years to bring Armenia to sign the peace agreement faster, and because this would enable EU and Armenia, get Azerbaijan and Turkey on board. This would help Armenia, really diversify, its foreign policy, because I don't think it's really possible to any containment of Russia without Azerbaijan and Turkey in this region. And you said what could help, peace agreement could help. And there are arguments from Armenian and Azerbaijani side why it's not happening fast. But Azerbaijan has its own arguments that there are, in constitution and other legal documents of Armenia, there are still territorial claim towards Azerbaijan and not just Azerbaijan. So there are things that, can be fixed from Armenian side. I always observe this kind of this voice that Azerbaijan can attack and occupy south of Armenia. No, I'm not saying that Azerbaijan is a benevolent actor here, but Azerbaijan, I think, first of all, will not attack or occupy a part of Armenia, not because it wants or doesn't want, or because Aliyev is a good or bad, benevolent, gracious, victorious side. No, just because of Iran, just because of certain geopolitics, not because of EU, it's not gonna happen. What could happen is a faster peace agreement, which needs, yes, pressure on Azerbaijan, but also pressure, on Armenia, and which is not happening. I don't know, when I was just watching your interview to Jung and Naif, for example, and the author, the journalist was saying, so when Azerbaijan attacked, Nagorno-Karabakh, so the entire narrative, when you hear, it's like, it's an Armenian-friendly narrative, like even at one of the latest events you organized at DGAP, there were like, almost all Armenian speakers panel talking about cultural heritage, of South Caucasus, of Armenia, Azerbaijan, and there was cultural heritage organization, US, Armenian-led, analyzing what Armenia and Azerbaijan did in past 30 years, how they destroyed or didn't destroy the cultural heritage, you know, like I think that everything I see in the public space in Germany, in Western countries, is really alienating, you know, Azerbaijan, Turkey, not engaging. And if we talk about geopolitics, now we live in very dangerous times, and you know, it's kind of, I think we're mixing priorities here. I think the biggest threat for all countries of South Caucasus, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia, is Russia. You know, it is there, and each of these countries tries to deal with it in its own way. But, you know, without consolidation, without kind of geopolitical, I don't know, agreement to have, because this is common interest, you know, that Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia can keep their independence, which is currently jeopardized by Russia. And I just cannot see how small Armenia, which already had a problem with Turkey and Azerbaijan, now having a problem with Russia, with, let's be honest, it's even much said in Armenia about it, empty promises from the West, can kind of survive. And I understand all the, which is legitimate also, fears, you know, in Armenia from Azerbaijan, but I think the major and real threat is coming from Russia. And don't you see any way, this is my question, how Armenia, Azerbaijan, Turkey, and European Union and US could bring their forces together, you know, fix the lines of the borders between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and change the rules of the game in the region?
Maybe first point, I think there is no black and white. There is no bad and good. Yeah. So I think and I think there is a point in criticizing the Western or the European narrative at the moment on that Armenia is the victim. Yeah. And Azerbaijan is the aggressor. And I think that's, yeah, it's a long history of war, and there was a first war who was won by the other side, and occupation of territories and so on. So I think that's an issue. Yeah. So because you made this point,
I'm not.
But I think
I'm trying to say, what is the solution? You know, how can we?
I understand, but you put so many questions into your one question that I at least have to react to this. And we had one event which has one focus, but we had a lot of other events, I think, which also had speakers from both sides, and tried to be much more balanced than this event, which was in particular in the beginning focused on mainly on Nagorno-Karabakh and the cultural heritage there from the Armenian side. I don't know. I think, yes, sure. I think this is the solution is a peace agreement, which would create win-win for all sides. But I think my observation is there is an agreement among the 3+3, without maybe Georgia and Armenia, but Iran, Turkey, and Russia, plus Azerbaijan, regional solutions for regional powers without the EU and the US. There is a asymmetry also now, a very strong asymmetry for Armenia in the whole situation, and a changing interest in engagement of Russia with Turkey and also with Azerbaijan. And the question is, what are the conditions for a peace agreement which is also acceptable for both sides? And I don't see at the moment, so I see the shortcomings also in Pashinyan's and in Armenian's policy, also since he came in power. I think there were also kind of provocations towards Azerbaijan, and these are also the results, partly at least the results, but the main is what happened before. But my impression is also a very maximalist approach from the Azerbaijani side. It's also an authoritarian country, and this is our main criticism here. It's a full-fledged authoritarian country, very repressive, and also with a maximalist approach. And the question is there really a willingness for a peace agreement which would really create peace? And there I have my doubts. Is there really a serious negotiation on this? Azerbaijan already has occupied parts of territory of Armenia. Yeah. So, and the question is how to find solutions for the border delimitation. We have the exclave question, which is, I think, still not solved. So I completely agree with you. I think it's in the interest of all these, should be in the interest of all these actors to have a peace agreement. I think it's in the interest also of the EU. It does not want to deal really with this proper. You see a limited engagement from the German side. It's rather facilitating than negotiating. So we don't want to touch this too much. Yeah. But we somehow support a little bit Armenia. But I just don't see at the moment that it is moving to this agreement, which would be acceptable for both sides. And I don't see that Aliyev really has an interest to end the conflict because he might need it maybe also domestically. So I hope I'm wrong. But what is now after Karabakh and why repressions are going on in Azerbaijan? So is he vulnerable or has he won a war? So I think, and that's also playing into all the narratives about Western Azerbaijan, about challenging also the territorial existence also of Armenia. So maybe that's just bargaining. Yeah, you could argue, but I think it goes beyond this, and that's why I have rather the impression they're testing how far they can go and what is the reaction of the West. Is there anything serious? And at the same time, there are negotiations with Russia and Turkey and maybe even Iran also in a way.
You know, I don't know if you have read, there is, you know, probably Armand Grigorian. He is a professor at Lehigh University. He recently published article exactly about Pashinyan's foreign policy, you know, about the reasons why he thinks, you know, also leaders like Pashinyan, how they think, how they act, and why, you know, this policy fails. And his thought is basically that, you know, the Pashinyan's foreign policy is, or in policy terms, revolutionary leaders like Pashinyan, they think that they can imagine something and then bend reality towards this, you know, imagined ideas that they think about. And this can have very negative consequences, you know. And so that is his main argument, how he sees it. And if I bring it to reality, practicalities of today's policy of Pashinyan and how the West sees it, as I told you, like there are certain kind of concepts that I think they worked. They worked. I don't know, maybe during but even during the Cold War, you know, if you look at EU countries, Western countries, there was never this, this is autocracy or this is democracy. Now we're not going to work with them just because they are autocracy, you know. Like, I think when you have security threats...
But that's not happening. There are corporations with Azerbaijan.
Exactly. But you brought this up, this authoritarianism in Azerbaijan, and my point is, which you can see it in the events, in discussions, in the narratives, in the media, here in Germany, in Europe, in US. There is this kind of attempt, or not attempt, there is, in fact, it's done on a very high level and mass level, that that, you know, just because Armenia, let's say, is democracy or Azerbaijan is autocracy, you know, or there are problems of interaction, or we cannot find common ground. I think that when you face the threat to European and global security, like, I think, and this is shared across from, I think, Washington, Brussels, Berlin, Ankara, you know, Yerevan, Baku, everyone feels this threat coming from Moscow. It made all our lives difficult, no matter how deals with this. But I refuse to believe that, for example, autocracies and democracies cannot work together, especially when there is a kind of higher security threat, when there is common interest. As I said, for example, for Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia is important to keep independence. EU supports it, US supports it. But the way how public discussions, narratives, even events are presented, you know, for example, there are events presented in European Parliament, in Brussels, in Strasbourg, just recently, about, you know, destruction of cultural heritage of Armenians, in Karabakh, I don't know, in Azerbaijan. I never understand what the point of these events when, Azerbaijan side is not invited, or I need to come back again to the event that DGAP recently organized, where you have basically a bunch of Armenians discussing, analyzing this, what is kind of, how does it help to find the bridges, to communicate to countries like Azerbaijan, Turkey, to get them on board? Like, it's not even the policy, and it comes from certain concepts, as I said, and certain policies that Pashinyan was basically pushing, it didn't work because it was against the reality. Because, Ter Petrosyan back then in 90s was, envisioning this. He was saying we need to make a peace deal with Azerbaijan now because later it will be impossible, because he has this realistic approach to geopolitics, to balance of power. So now that it didn't work in Europe, all this kind of failure of policy vis-a-vis Russia, Ukraine, don't you think that now is the time to open up, kind of to have a more realistic approach that can be in interest of all? Not all, but at least I honestly don't understand why Azerbaijan, Turkey, Armenia, EU, and the US do not work together, because they kind of work against each other, in some way.
Yeah, I agree. I think it should be in their common interest to find a solution for this. And I think we in theory we are closer than we were maybe ever since 30 years, in a way that the Karabakh question somehow is not anymore there, on the table. But I think we have this. I don't know. I think we have these shifts also. I don't believe in this antagonism, democracies versus autocracies. So I don't think, and I think there are much more hybrid regimes. And also the Armenian system is more hybrid system, in a way. And also globally, you have more hybrid systems. But I think for me, it's rather a question of lack of engagement. So of lack of engagement from the EU side, and also a withdrawal of the US. It's also ignoring realities on Russia for more than a decade. We can say two decades. We had since 2014. We had already a war in Ukraine, and I think in the end our limited reaction invited Russia also partly to do now the big war in Ukraine, because it had these kind of expectations. We can see how Georgia is backsliding also because, with the increasing engagement also of Russia there, and Russia is still a norm setter also in the South Caucasus. So it's still very influential in the South Caucasus, even if it's weakened. So, and I think also Turkey has its ambitions, but it has also its limits. So I just don't see a really strategic policy, neither from the EU nor from the US towards the South Caucasus. I see more engagement of the EU, but I don't know what the EU goal is in the end in the South Caucasus, except maybe some kind of stability. But there is such a fundamental geopolitical change now going on in the region, shaped by internal and external powers, and the EU is somehow part of it, but it does not really own this, or it's not really taking ownership of the whole developments. And the US is not really present there, in my opinion, except some meetings, So, and I think that's the problem. I don't see the EU really as the decisive actor, or the US at the moment, for shaping the new regional order in the South Caucasus, which will be much more transactional, much more changing also all the time. I don't think there will be a stable order soon, because several actors have maybe no interest in this. And we are not I think, and Ukraine is key. Ukraine is key also for the South Caucasus, how this is going. I think so. If we impact on Ukraine in a different way, what is possible? Yeah, you can win competition of arms production from the Western side without any problem against Russia if you take it serious. Yeah, with technology, with the money, and so on. But it's not happening. Yeah. So, and I think that's the problem. There is, I don't know. I really ask myself. Yeah. So I think there is a lack of really understanding and maybe wanting to understand the realities and doing the things which will not increase the costs for yourself. That you in the end are shaped by other actors who are shaping your neighborhoods, yeah, in different ways. And we can see this also in other regions, in the Western Balkans, for instance, yeah. So and I think that's for me rather the problem. We can look into details and into some perceptions and so on, but I rather see more talk, but not really this action which is needed and really part of the game, being really a serious part of the game.
The last question, I know it will, do you think France delivering arms and more arms to Armenia will make Armenia safer? I just want to understand, you know, considering everything we talked about, like Turkey, Azerbaijan, Russia, and just delivering more arms to Armenia, making it the greatest army, like, do you think it has any chance? Like, do you think it's a military problem that Armenia needs to solve and the West needs to help to Armenia with to make Armenia safer?
I think I understand the logic that to increase the costs for a possible attack. So if you assess that there might be an attack from the Azerbaijani side and there's a military pressure and it's definitely there, yeah, on the border, then I think it could make sense to increase the costs. But it's a half-hearted step. Yeah, there's some military support. And I think the other question is, does Iran, for instance, like this? Yeah, I think, and Turkey like it. So I don't think this is a solution for really deterring and increasing the security of Armenia. And again, it's a very typical EU approach. You do a little bit, but you don't do things which are really serious in having really a footprint also in the region or in the country. So it's not a serious step, in my opinion. And then we can discuss about the consequences. But I don't see really this taking it so serious that it's a priority. And then really we also, you have to combine it with the political activities, with engagement also much differently in the conflict and in really be part of the negotiations in a way. And that's not happening. And I think that's for me rather the problem than these. I don't think this is really a threat to Azerbaijan, to be honest. I think it's also overplayed by Azerbaijan what France is doing there. So I think it's just overestimated. But again, it provokes and it creates tensions without providing a kind of a solution or really going deeper into this conflict and into this region to be really an actor.
Stefan, thank you very much for your time. And I hope I will see you again to discuss the developments. Thanks.
Thank you.